Nexus Station Control Center. The control center of Nexus Station was a breathtaking sight, a fusion of sleek metallic structures and pulsating lights that illuminated the vast expanse of the interstellar hub. Floating above the station's massive central hub, you could feel the hum of the technology beneath your feet, the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. The air here was thick with the scent of ozone and recycled air, giving the place a cold, artificial edge. Thousands of species from every corner of the universe converged at this location, trading, sharing knowledge, and weaving the fabric of galactic diplomacy. Commander Christopher Reed stood at rigid attention in the heart of the control center, the crisp, flickering lights casting long shadows across his broad frame. His well-toned body was a direct result of years spent honing his skills in both military service and security operations. The tight black sleeveless shirt he wore accentuated his muscular build, while his dark cargo pants and combat boots screamed of purpose. His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, always alert, always prepared. The station director, Phelps, a tall and stern-faced man with salt and pepper hair, stood at his console, his fingers dancing over the holographic interface. With a flick of his wrist, the image of a woman appeared in front of Christopher, her features sharp and distinctly alien. The hologram shimmered in a ghostly blue hue, casting an ethereal glow on Phelps' face. Phelps, station director. Reed, I have an assignment for you. One that might prove difficult. Christopher's posture remained unwavering, his expression set. Christopher, Commander Reed. Sir, I'm known for handling difficult situations. Just tell me what I need to do. Phelps tapped a few more buttons, bringing up the file of the woman in the hologram. The image flickered for a moment before solidifying, showing a striking humanoid female. Her emerald skin seemed to pulse under the soft blue light of the display, and her silver hair cascaded like a liquid waterfall down her shoulders. Her eyes, bright and mischievous, gleamed with an arrogance that immediately put Christopher on alert. Phelps, with a sigh. This is Lady Alyria Thalaron, daughter of High Counselor Thar of the Verdant Conclave. She's on a diplomatic mission, but she's caused quite a few issues. 3 of our security personnel have already requested reassignment because of her behavior. I need you to handle her. The hologram of Alyria shifted, her form now appearing to move, with her mischievous smile barely hidden behind her calm exterior. A strange, intoxicating energy seemed to emanate from her, and Christopher could almost hear her laughing softly, as if daring him to meet the challenge she would inevitably present. Meeting Lady Alyria. Christopher stepped into Suite 17, the air inside almost instantly warmer, with an ambience of luxury hanging thick in the atmosphere. The suite was nothing less than magnificent, with walls made of translucent crystal that offered an unobstructed view of the swirling nebula outside the station. Each piece of alien art adorning the walls seemed to tell its own mysterious story, with colors and shapes that appeared to shift and move in ways that defied logic. Strange devices hummed softly in the background, adding to the exotic feel of the room. At the center of it all was Alyria. She lounged carelessly on the plush sofa, her posture deliberately relaxed, but her eyes never leaving Christopher's figure. The lighting in the room cast a warm glow on her emerald skin, giving her an almost ethereal presence. The room seemed to pulse with energy when she moved, as if she was a force of nature in her own right. Her outfit, a sleek black leather bodysuit with a plunging neckline, seemed to be designed to distract, but there was something in her eyes a challenge. She was no stranger to power, nor the games of control. Christopher, calmly, his voice unwavering. Commander Christopher Reed. I'm here to ensure your safety, Lady Thalaron. Alyria's smile deepened, and her eyes glinted mischievously. She stood and moved towards him with feline grace, each step calculated to provoke. Her every movement was deliberate, almost teasing, as if testing the limits of his resolve. Alyria, smiling, her voice playful. Another guard? Let's see how long this one lasts. She circled around him, her fingers tracing the air just close enough to graze his broad shoulders, her presence overwhelming. Her voice, light but cutting, seemed to hang in the air between them. Alyria, mocking. Let's see how much trouble you can handle, Commander. Christopher remained still, his eyes focused and resolute, refusing to let her provoke him. Christopher, firmly. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to make sure you don't cause any diplomatic problems. Follow the station rules, and we won't have issues. Alyria's playful smile faltered for just a moment, but it quickly returned, now tinged with a hint of intrigue. She wasn't used to someone like him, someone who didn't bend to her charms. Alyria, slightly amused. Oh, but rules are so boring, Commander. Don't you think life would be more interesting without them? First challenge. The grand atrium of Nexus Station was alive with the pulse of interstellar diplomacy. Holographic banners floated overhead, shimmering with the emblem of every species that graced this monumental hub. The room buzzed with conversation voices, music, and the occasional clinking of glasses filled the air, blending into a melody that felt both foreign and familiar. The space itself was vast, the ceilings stretching high above to a nebula-lit sky visible through enormous transparent windows. Alyria, ever the captivating enigma, moved through the crowd like a tempest, her emerald skin glowing softly in the low light. Her silver hair shimmered, cascading around her shoulders like liquid moonlight. She was a living work of art, effortlessly drawing the eyes of the diplomats who circled her like moths to a flame. She reveled in the attention, her laughter like the tinkling of crystals as she flirted and teased with every smile. But as the night wore on, her charm began to shift into something more deliberate. Alyria's hand moved to take a drink from a passing server, but in a moment of calculated carelessness, she let the glass slip from her fingers. The bright blue liquid spilled across the pristine floor, splashing loudly, drawing gasps from the nearby diplomats. The rare Centurion spirit was prized across the galaxy, and wasting it was nothing short of sacrilege. She looked down at the mess with a playfully innocent expression, the glimmer in her eyes telling a different story. Alyria, mockingly, her voice airy. Oops, my hand slipped. She raised an eyebrow and let her gaze dance over the onlookers. Humans are so uptight about the smallest things. Christopher's sharp eyes narrowed as he stepped forward, his body a steady presence amidst the chaos she had stirred. The air between them thickened as he closed the distance, his hand barely brushing the side of her arm as he addressed her. Christopher, calmly, his voice unwavering. Lady Thalaron, I think you've had enough drinks for tonight. He kept his gaze locked with hers, as if daring her to test him further. Alyria's lips curled into a subtle smile, her eyes glinting with mischief. Her gaze never left Christopher, watching him as though trying to decipher his next move. Alyria, playfully, her voice a low tease. We both know that wasn't an accident. But go ahead, try harder if you want to embarrass me. She leaned in just slightly, her breath brushing against his ear as she added with a mischievous whisper. I'm just getting started. The tension between them was palpable. Alyria was intrigued he was different from the others. He wasn't fazed by her provocations, and that intrigued her. She could see it in the way he stood, unflinching, calm and composed in the face of her antics. It only made her want to push more, to unravel the calm facade that he wore like armor. But for now, the challenge was hers, and she had no intention of letting him off easy. Alyria tests boundaries. Days passed, and Alyria's attempts to stir trouble became more bold, more calculated. She tested every limit, every rule, daring Christopher to stop her. He thwarted each move with an unwavering resolve. Each time she tried to slip away into restricted zones, he intercepted her with seamless efficiency. Every time she took a misstep, he was there to correct her, his presence a constant reminder of the boundaries she seemed so intent on breaking. Alyria's rebellion, however, was far from subtle. It was a dance of defiance and dominance, an intricate game where she pushed and pulled at every rule he upheld, seeing just how far she could go without breaking. One evening, after a particularly provocative outburst, Alyria had loudly insulted a diplomat in front of an entire delegation. Christopher decided enough was enough. He was done playing the game. He stepped into her path as she attempted to storm away from the scene, her movements quick and sharp, her anger crackling like static in the air. Her emerald eyes burned with defiance as she glared at him. Christopher, assertively, his voice firm. I've been patient with you, Lady Thalaron, but that ends now. He stepped forward, blocking her way. If you don't follow orders, things will get complicated. For both of us. Alyria's anger flared, and she stepped toward him, eyes narrowed in challenge. The room seemed to pulse with her energy, a silent electric charge crackling between them. Alyria, angrily, voice dripping with disdain. You think you can control me? She spat the words as if daring him to act. For a brief moment, the room held its breath. Even the air seemed to thicken in anticipation, as though the very station was waiting for the next move. Christopher, however, didn't flinch. His expression remained cool, unreadable. Christopher, his voice a low, steady whisper. I don't need to control you. But you will learn the importance of boundaries. He moved without warning, taking a firm grip on her arm and guiding her toward a quieter space in the station. The bustling crowd, unaware of the undercurrent of tension between them, continued to mingle in the background. Once they were isolated in a dimly lit corridor, where the hum of the station was muffled, Christopher turned to face her. His posture was rigid, his demeanor all business, but there was a cool edge to his voice that hadn't been there before. Christopher, calm but unwavering. You've been testing my patience for days now, Lady Thalaron. He stepped closer, his tone firm and commanding. But I'm done. If you won't follow the rules, then you'll learn the consequences of your actions. Alyria's chest heaved with fury as she glared up at him. Her pride, her power, everything she had ever known had been built on defiance. No one had ever dared to challenge her authority, let alone treat her with anything but reverence. And yet here stood this human, imposing his will upon her in a way she had never experienced. Alyria, her voice low, filled with a dangerous edge. You think you can teach me respect, human? She sneered, her hands clenched at her sides. Christopher didn't respond immediately. His eyes, sharp and cold, met hers, and for a moment, the space between them seemed to stretch. Without another word, he stepped forward, his hand catching her wrist with a surprising firmness. She didn't resist, perhaps because she didn't know how to. Or perhaps because, for the first time, she was facing something stronger than her usual games. Christopher, calmly, but with authority. You wanted to test me? Then here's your answer. In a single fluid motion, he sat down on a nearby bench, pulling her across his lap before she could fully react. Alyria's eyes widened in shock as she tried to move, but his grip was unyielding. A sharp sting, controlled and purposeful, landed against her rear, a firm slap that echoed in the otherwise silent corridor. Alyria, shocked, her voice a mix of surprise and outrage. No one has ever dared to treat me like this. She gasped, trying to regain control of the situation, but his calm demeanor only fueled her anger. Christopher, his voice unchanging. Then it's long overdue. He paused, his eyes locking with hers, his words unyielding. Learn respect now, or this won't be the last lesson. Her mind spun with confusion and anger, her pride bruised in ways she had never imagined. And yet, beneath the storm of emotion, there was something else, a quiet, trembling respect that began to take root deep within her. For the first time, someone had treated her not as a pampered princess, but as someone who needed to be held accountable. Alyria stared at him, her chest rising and falling with the weight of her emotions, as the lesson she had so long resisted began to sink in. Political intrigue. The mercenaries had been neutralized. The chaos, though still lingering in the air, had subsided. Security teams, led by Christopher, worked swiftly to regain control, ensuring that the station was secured and that the civilians were safe. Alyria, however, was different now. Her energy had shifted, no longer the playful, rebellious aristocrat, she was now something more somber, her posture heavy with the burden of a truth she had been hiding. They found themselves in a quiet room, the low hum of the station now a distant sound in the background. Alyria stood near a window, her eyes tracing the stars outside as if looking for answers in the cosmos. The glow of the nebula bathed her skin in soft light, but there was an edge to her expression now, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. Alyria, frustrated, her voice tight. I'm not just a bargaining chip, Christopher. You have no idea what it's like to be treated like one. She turned to him, her eyes narrowing as her frustration bubbled to the surface. My father wants to marry me off to Admiral Pax. He sees it as the perfect way to strengthen alliances. She scoffed, her voice bitter. To secure his political power. It has nothing to do with me. Christopher stood still, his gaze locked on her. He could see the way the words weighed her down, could feel the anger and helplessness beneath the surface. This was more than just a marriage. This was her life, her future entangled in the machinations of power and control. Christopher, with empathy, his tone softer. You deserve more than that, Alyria. You're not just a pawn in someone else's game. He stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with an understanding that seemed to soften her resolve. Let's prove this wasn't just about politics. We can make this about you, about what you want, not what your father wants for you. Alyria's gaze wavered, her strong exterior cracking for the briefest of moments. The revelation of her true feelings hung heavy between them, but her pride was still there, holding on tightly. The weight of her father's expectations pressed on her like a storm cloud. But Christopher's words, grounded and sincere, offered her something she hadn't allowed herself to consider, the possibility of choosing her own path. For a moment, the vastness of the station, the hum of technology and the starry expanse beyond, seemed to fade into the background. There was only the two of them, standing on the precipice of something new, something that could change the course of not just her life, but the fate of the galaxy itself. Alyria's eyes met his again, the defiance still there, but now there was something more, a flicker of hope, or perhaps a question. A choice. The mercenary attack. The peaceful hum of Nexus Station was shattered by a sudden, blaring alarm that rattled through the very core of the station. The lights flickered, the once serene atmosphere morphing into a cacophony of urgency. An automated voice echoed, its tone cold and mechanical. Automated voice, calm, but urgent. Attention all personnel, security breach in progress. Lockdown initiated. Repeat, lockdown initiated. A cold chill swept through the air as panic began to seep into the once peaceful station. The metallic walls vibrated with the tension of something sinister. Outside the observation windows, the nebula shimmered softly, but the chaos inside was anything but serene. The whispers of the unknown had arrived in the form of mercenaries highly trained, deadly, and intent on something the station's inhabitants could only guess at. Christopher's gaze sharpened as he scanned the security feeds. The mercenaries, clad in black armor, were already making their way through the corridors, weapons drawn, their movements swift and methodical. They weren't here for diplomacy. They were here for something else entirely. Christopher, commanding, his voice low but firm. Stay close, Alyria. I'll keep you safe. He turned to face Alyria, whose usual composure was replaced by an expression of surprise and fear. Her emerald skin paled slightly, her silver eyes wide as she absorbed the weight of the situation. Yet, even in the chaos, she was still a force to be reckoned with. As Christopher ushered her through the halls, the air seemed to thicken with the tension of impending violence. The sharp sound of boots on metal floors echoed in the distance. The mercenaries were closing in. But Alyria, ever the enigma, remained calm. With a subtle shift in her posture, she closed her eyes for a brief moment and inhaled deeply. Then, with a swift motion, she released a pheromone-laden breath into the air, her body seeming to radiate an almost tangible energy. The mercenaries who came too close faltered, their faces twisting in confusion and disorientation. Their sharp, predatory eyes glazed over, the air around them thick with confusion. The pheromones, potent and intoxicating, disrupted their coordination. Christopher, with his military training, understood immediately. But what struck him wasn't just her power, it was the unexpected vulnerability she had exposed in him. She wasn't just a princess to protect. She was someone with a capacity for power of her own, someone who could fight back when the stakes were high. Christopher, his voice steady, but with an edge of concern. Don't ever disobey my orders again. He glanced at her, his voice hardening. This isn't a game, Alyria. These are mercenaries, and they won't hesitate to kill. Alyria, defiantly, her voice laced with pride. I'm not just a helpless princess, Commander. She took a step toward him, her eyes fierce. I can help too. Don't forget that. She moved with purpose, her movements precise, each step resonating with the quiet strength she had been hiding all along. The two of them moved through the hallways, Christopher protecting her from harm, his body a shield against the danger that loomed. The air seemed charged with static, each movement feeling like it could ignite a spark in the air. As they reached the junction leading to the secure area, they heard the unmistakable sound of weapons fire echoing down the corridor. But Christopher's resolve was unshaken. Every part of him, from his calculated movements to the way he held his gun steady, was a reflection of the bond they were beginning to form, not as protector and princess, but as two individuals who understood the weight of the moment. Political intrigue. The mercenaries had been neutralized. The chaos, though still lingering in the air, had subsided. Security teams, led by Christopher, worked swiftly to regain control, ensuring that the station was secured and that the civilians were safe. Alyria, however, was different now. Her energy had shifted, no longer the playful, rebellious aristocrat, she was now something more somber, her posture heavy with the burden of a truth she had been hiding. They found themselves in a quiet room, the low hum of the station now a distant sound in the background. Alyria stood near a window, her eyes tracing the stars outside as if looking for answers in the cosmos. The glow of the nebula bathed her skin in soft light, but there was an edge to her expression now, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. Alyria, frustrated, her voice tight. I'm not just a bargaining chip, Christopher. You have no idea what it's like to be treated like one. She turned to him, her eyes narrowing as her frustration bubbled to the surface. My father wants to marry me off to Admiral Pax. He sees it as the perfect way to strengthen alliances. She scoffed, her voice bitter. To secure his political power. It has nothing to do with me. Christopher stood still, his gaze locked on her. He could see the way the words weighed her down, could feel the anger and helplessness beneath the surface. This was more than just a marriage. This was her life, her future entangled in the machinations of power and control. Christopher, with empathy, his tone softer. You deserve more than that, Alyria. You're not just a pawn in someone else's game. He stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with an understanding that seemed to soften her resolve. Let's prove this wasn't just about politics. We can make this about you, about what you want, not what your father wants for you. Alyria's gaze wavered, her strong exterior cracking for the briefest of moments. The revelation of her true feelings hung heavy between them, but her pride was still there, holding on tightly. The weight of her father's expectations pressed on her like a storm cloud. But Christopher's words, grounded and sincere, offered her something she hadn't allowed herself to consider, the possibility of choosing her own path. For a moment, the vastness of the station, the hum of technology and the starry expanse beyond, seemed to fade into the background. There was only the two of them, standing on the precipice of something new, something that could change the course of not just her life, but the fate of the galaxy itself. Alyria's eyes met his again, the defiance still there, but now there was something more, a flicker of hope, or perhaps a question. A choice. The challenge of merit. A low, rumbling murmur filled the grand hall as the assembled members of the Verdant High Council exchanged uncertain glances. The atmosphere had been thick with political tension, the air itself seeming to hold its breath. The large, circular chamber was bathed in soft, amber light, casting elongated shadows across the walls adorned with intricate carvings of verdant history, ancient symbols of power and tradition. Alyria stood in the center of the room, her emerald skin gleaming faintly in the low light. The weight of the moment pressed heavily upon her, but she refused to yield. The decision she had been avoiding now hung in the air, both liberating and terrifying. Her voice rang out with a clarity that struck through the heavy silence. Alyria, boldly, her voice steady and filled with conviction. I reject this marriage and invoke the challenge of merit. The words, ancient and binding, caused a ripple of shock to sweep across the room. The challenge of merit was an old and revered tradition within the verdant conclave. It was the ultimate test of one's worth, a ceremonial trial that allowed someone to challenge a betrothal if they felt they were not being honored. The challenge was meant to prove the strength, intellect, and spirit of the challenger, and it carried the weight of the entire society's judgment. Alyria's declaration was not only a rejection of the political marriage forced upon her but also a declaration of her autonomy. She would fight for her right to choose her own future. But the room grew colder, the tension building like a storm about to break. Alyria's gaze was unyielding, but the council's murmur grew louder, unsure of the implications. Christopher, stepping forward, his voice firm and unwavering. I challenge Admiral Pax for the right to marry Lady Alyria Thalaron. A collective gasp filled the chamber. Christopher Reed, a human officer with no standing in the verdant conclave, challenging Admiral Pax, an esteemed leader of the Centurion fleet. The weight of his words seemed to hang in the air, an unexpected twist in a game of political power and tradition. The council fell silent, their eyes now fixed on the two challengers, Christopher, standing tall with his resolute expression, and Alyria, her emerald eyes alight with a fire she had long hidden. The room felt as though it had stopped breathing. Trials of the challenge. The first trial was a test of the mind. It was a battle of wit and intellect, a contest of strategy and knowledge. The arena was a grand chamber lined with ancient symbols of the verdant people, glowing with an otherworldly energy. Each contestant had to navigate a series of puzzles and riddles, challenges that tested not only their intelligence but their ability to remain calm under pressure. The trial was grueling, but Christopher's military training and sharp mind led him to victory, although only by a small margin. The crowd buzzed with excitement, but the battle was far from over. The second trial's strength was more brutal. A combat of skill, endurance, and agility, pitting Christopher against Admiral Pax in a fight that shook the very foundations of the arena. It was a clash of titans, Admiral Pax, with years of experience and unmatched power, versus Christopher, whose training was tailored for efficiency rather than pure strength. Admiral Pax emerged victorious in the second trial, the resounding force of his power leaving Christopher breathless and bruised. But there was something in his eyes, a spark of determination that refused to fade, even as the crowd murmured in disbelief. And then came the final trial, the trial of spirit. This trial was unlike any other, a test not of physical prowess or intellect, but of the heart and soul. It was a challenge of true intent, where every word and action was weighed against the sincerity of one's spirit. Christopher, during the trial, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I didn't come here for politics. I came for her. I offer something no political arrangement can: respect, partnership, and freedom. His words echoed through the arena, the truth of them resonating with the very fabric of the verdant people. The truth sense, an ancient artifact that could detect the sincerity of one's words, glowed with a brilliant light as it recognized Christopher's authenticity. Alyria, watching from the sidelines, felt the shift in the air. Her heart pounded in her chest as the truth of his words reached her in a way nothing else ever had. He wasn't here for power, for politics. He was here for her. He saw her as an individual, not a pawn in a game. The truth sense activated, confirming Christopher's sincerity. And in that moment, Alyria knew. The decision was hers, not her father's, not the council's. Alyria, stepping forward, her voice clear and resolute. I choose Commander Christopher Reed. A wave of disbelief rippled through the room. The High Counselor's face tightened, his anger barely contained, but Alyria's voice, calm and unwavering, had sealed her fate. She had chosen her path, one that was not dictated by political gain, but by love and respect. Resolution. The room fell into an eerie silence as the High Counselor, unable to mask his frustration, slowly approached his daughter. His tall frame cast a long shadow in the dim light of the council chamber. His once icy expression had softened, though only slightly. High Counselor Thalaron, reluctantly, his voice quiet but firm. Perhaps it's time for new approaches. My daughter has made her choice. Alyria stood tall, her posture unwavering, as she looked her father in the eye. The ancient customs of the verdant people were powerful, but in that moment, it was clear that the future would no longer be written solely by tradition. The council, the High Counselor, and even Admiral Pax had underestimated the strength of her will. Christopher, standing at her side, could feel the weight of the moment settle upon them. They had not only defeated an ancient tradition but had also forged a new path together, one that transcended the power struggles of their worlds. They had won not just the challenge of merit, but the right to shape their own future. As the council acknowledged Christopher's victory, the High Counselor's reluctant acceptance of his daughter's choice was a victory for more than just the two of them. It was a victory for autonomy, for breaking free from the chains of expectation. Alyria, with a playful smirk, her voice light and teasing. "Ready for our next adventure, Commander?" Christopher, grinning, his voice filled with affection and resolve. "I wouldn't want it any other way." As they walked side by side through the council chamber, their path was uncertain, but one thing was clear: their journey had only just begun. Together, they were ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them.